Now, I want to get directly to why we're here today, and this leads me to be able to introduce two very special guests. And I felt it appropriate to show my full family because while my guest co-host today is Carlo White, my husband, and Hannah White, my daughter, I also have an awesome, wonderful son who is part of our nucleus as well, but he is not participating in today's conversation, but I do want to acknowledge him. And so let's first just go to the next slide so I can tell you a little bit about our two guests today. I want to give them an introduction before I bring them on to share. So Carlo holds a BS in economics from Clemson University. He served as captain in the United States Air Force, where he managed $36 million budget as a comptroller of Ahmed Al Jaber Air Base in Kuwait. He has started multiple companies, with White Holdings being his most successful, growing it to over $3.5 million in sales in 2015, and it continues to grow to this day. Carlo's civic involvement includes work on behalf of organizations and programs that support the well-being and interests of business, children, and families. He formerly served on the Board of Advisors for the Greenville Chamber of Commerce, the Board of Directors for Community Works Federal Credit Union, and he is the co-founder of the Carlo and Nika White Foundation, a 501c3 with the mission to equip and empower disadvantaged communities across the globe with the three foundational elements needed to thrive in life, and those include Christ, commerce, and community. Carlo was also appointed to the Greenville City Police Commission Board. We'll talk a little bit about that today. He is active in the ministry as an elder at New Life Church in Spartanburg, the father of two incredibly young, almost adult kids. Hannah, of course, you'll meet today, and then CJ. And of course, he's my life partner. Our next co-host today is Hannah. Hannah Joy White is a very enthusiastic student, ambitious, and she's committed to implementing positive change by utilizing the core values of business and servant leadership. She is a junior this fall and a member of the University of South Carolina Honors College. She's studying finance and marketing at the Darla Moore School of Business. Additionally, Hannah is one of approximately 140 students out of 34,000 appointed to ambassadorship at the university, and serves as the student body vice president of the University of South Carolina. She has a passion for promoting diversity and inclusion in everything that she does, and she served on the Inclusion and Equity Committee in Student Government, among many other things. She is currently joining us today from Washington, D.C., where she is there for a summer internship that she's doing with Ernst & Young. And so welcome, Carlo. Welcome, Hannah. We can stop sharing the screen now so we can get your faces on. And I want to just give you a quick moment just to share with our audience a welcome or a greeting, both of you.
I'll go first. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mom, for introducing me. Like you said, my name is Hannah, and I'm so excited to be here and to have this conversation with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah.
Hello,
Carlo.
everyone. Hello, everyone, and thank you, baby, for inviting me and Hannah. I must say, Hannah's resume is pretty impressive, man. I mean, I was impressed with that. So good job, Hannah.
Okay, Dad.
But outside of that, I'm excited to be here and just want to participate and add any value I can add to the conversation.
Great. Thank you both so much. And so I wanted to frame our conversations today by giving our audience just a little bit of insight as to why I thought this would be appropriate in terms of inviting the two of you to serve as my guest co-host. And so we've had many different guests over the last several weeks, and each session has felt a little different based upon who's a part of the conversation. But when I started thinking about the work and some of the issues that are really coming front and center right now into all of our lives, I realized that the way in which we have blended our work and our passions and our convictions, they're all intertwining in a way that I think is deeper and more intentional than prior to COVID or even the recent racial crisis. And so I thought to myself, as I was witnessing what Carlo was doing in his own sphere of influence and what Hannah was doing with her leadership roles, that we all have each been called to action in a multitude of ways. And so I wanted to bring that perspective to this conversation today. And so I want to start with you, Carlo, and I want you to just talk a little bit about what has been resonating with you during this time, what has led you to some of the actions that I know we're going to talk about today, and just give us a little bit of flavor for how you've been navigating and processing this time.
This time that we're talking about is basically race in America and just kind of the tough walk it is to navigate that, being that we don't talk about it much. And so I, like everyone else, is just going on about life. I really not something I've talked about or even really spent a lot of time talking about it. Everybody talks about it within their families, but talking about it with other families, like us talking about it with white people. I was moved to action watching George Floyd, just like everyone else. But what happened with George Floyd was not just a bad act of cops killing him, but to me, what hurt even the deeper was watching the system struggle, the judicial system struggle to figure out, what do we do with this? We saw a man get murdered in broad daylight. What do we do with this? And so I went through a range of emotions of anger, fear, frustrations, and ultimately landed on one of just wanting to fight. First, literally wanted to fight someone, but ended up with wanting to fight for love in the spirit of Martin Luther King. So I was inspired by all the peaceful protesters that have taken and put themselves at harm's way to just try to call attention to this glaring inequity that we have in America, and this glaring vulnerability I think we have in America if we don't go back and deal with it. So that's kind of what moved me and got me to where I wanted to take some action and fight for love.
Awesome. I love that. So Hannah, very similar question for you. What is your inspiration? What's driving you right now? And how have you been navigating and processing the events that so many of us are just really trying to reflect, where can I make a difference?
Yes, so growing up, and I know since you guys are my parents, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been words that have been acted on and discussed all throughout childhood and upbringing. But I do think that coming into college, I found a platform to where I can actually use those things that we always talk about at home, in the house. I see you doing your thing all day, every day, and actually make the platform my own to do the same thing. And so even coming in, becoming the university ambassador to increase representation of minority students, and then joining freshman council through student government and being a part of the Inclusion Equity Committee, to now serving as the student body vice president, I always knew that that is the platform that I ran on. And so I always had diversity, inclusion, and equity at the forefront of everything that I have done and continue to do. And I just believe that opportunities or incidences like the George Floyd incidents, because this has been happening all throughout the years. It's just now we have social media. It was videotaped and it went viral. And so now people are starting to become more aware, thinking that they need to speak up, which is the case. But I took this as an opportunity of, right now, diversity, equity, inclusion, these injustices are at the forefront for everyone, not just certain people, not just me, not just the chief diversity officer of corporations, of colleges. Everyone is kind of forced to see the injustices that are happening. And so taking that into consideration, now saying, okay, what platforms do I have? I'm the student body vice president, I am an ambassador. How do I make change in the communities that I affect? So whether it is talking to the director of the visitor center saying we need more representation, creating an African American history tour for the university, and even getting student leaders together all over campus in order to demand some changes to be done here on our campus. That is how I took all that is happening and made some type of change towards it. But as well as, I think we're going to talk about it later, but getting more involved or more aware and knowledgeable about the government, politics, why everything is the way it is, that also has been helping me process all that is happening and trying to figure out what more I can do in order to implement change.
That is awesome, Hannah. Thank you. And I think it's worthy to note that you are, of course, the student body vice president. I think there's 35,000 students at the University of South Carolina. And I believe that from a historical perspective, there's only been maybe a few other people of color that have served in the vice president role. But then your counterpart, Izzy, serves as the president, and Izzy is the first international student to assume that role. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so fantastic. So I know that the University of South Carolina is definitely, has something to be proud of in terms of having two great individuals leading the university that care a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I want to stay with you for a second, Hannah. What are you seeing in terms of how your generation is navigating racial inequities? Because I have been so impressed with the fact that the young people are woke, and that is really inspiring to me. And so what would you say about your generation right now and how in which they are navigating and processing and getting involved in these big systemic issues that we're trying to dismantle?
So I say that we're definitely very vocal. I have never seen as many petitions ever in my life than from the past 2 months. Petitions, different movements all across the nation, and collaboration. So even talk about my experience from being a vice president of the University of South Carolina, having the opportunity to not only be in conversations with student leaders on campus, but also in conversations with student government executives and student leaders at all the universities, from Harvard to MIT, UGA, you name it, just coming together, demanding change. And so I've also seen them being strategic at it. So when it comes to, for example, the 2020 revision that a bunch of student leaders came together in order to create a list of demands towards the university, very strategic, took maybe 3 to 4 weeks to create this one document. It's only like 2 pages, but very intentional about every single word that was put in that document, reviewed by administrators, faculty, mentors, other students at other schools, in order to make sure that not only are we demanding change, but we are intentional about what we're trying to do. Why do we want this? Why is this wrong? Why should this be fixed? And come at it at that angle. I've also seen a lot of individuals speaking up or standing up no matter what their platform is. So whether it is they have a student leadership position, or they're just a typical student, maybe if they're in the journalism school and they're now using their creativity and writing in order to express how they're feeling, how to show support. Resources from all over have been very prominent on social media. So I just think, I know I always say, like, you caught me at the right time, but the America, the nation, the world has caught this generation at the right time. It's COVID-19. So we've all been in our houses, just looking for something to do, something to be a part of. And so this is the perfect time to where we're not going to be silent. And I think that that's being shown all over the world.
That's awesome. It's awesome. It's inspiring. So thank you, Hannah, for what you're doing in your leadership. So I want to go to you now, Carlo. So there was one day I recall we both had a really long day of work, and you were very intently focused on drafting something. And at the time, I didn't know what the something was. And I later came to realize that you were so moved in this moment to action that you felt it appropriate to write personal letters to some people that were in your network. So why don't you take us through that story and that journey and some of the outcomes of it?
Yeah, so I said earlier that I went through the range of emotions, landed on I want to fight, but not just fight physically or fight out of anger. I want to fight for love. And the reason why that's important to me is because in Matthew 24, as being a Christian, as Matthew 24, Jesus, when he's talking about all the things that humanity will go through during hard times, he said in Matthew 24:12, he said, because of lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. And I found my love growing cold for my white brothers. And I have some deep relationships with some white males. Relationships we formed serving in the military, met Jason Devine and Alchemy at Jabber Kuwait. I always say he's the white Carlo, and he always say that I'm the black Jason. I mean, we just hit it off from day one and have stayed in contact. And we've shared family, business, every aspect of life. We've met and continuously met and prayed over each other and supported one another and challenged one another. But not just Jason, there's several that I've done this for. We'll go to retreats with a group of guys, just meet only black and some white males, and we would actually go and do business plans together and just really invest in each other. Well, recently, because of everything that's going on, I've kind of found myself being unintentional about their well-being. Really kind of been like, you know what, I can't do this with them. I associated all white people basically with the mega movement, which is, I feel is a racial movement inside of political, cloaked in political things. So I began to get unintentional, just apathy, just whatever, and not really engaging them. And I was actually struck. And so what I did was I wrote an open letter. When all this happened, I wrote an open letter to them. And first in that letter, I apologized. I apologized for doing to them what I was mad at white people doing to me. And that is putting them in this category. We didn't even discuss race. Me and my brothers that we had some real impactful relationships. We never discussed race, but yet I put this and projected on them what I was seeing played out with other people. And so I apologize for that and just wanted them to know I love them and that I no longer was going to be unintentional. I no longer was going to be disengaged, but I was going to continue to be intentional about their well-being. So with that, love tells the truth. And we have always been truthful with each other about family. I could tell Jason, I disagree with you on the way you're approaching your wife. I disagree with you on the way you're handling your children. We could always tell the truth with each other about family, about business, about just different challenges we're having in life, but we've never brought race into the conversation. So what I told him is, I want to continue this love relationship. I want to continue to support each other in our well-being and our maturing as men, but we're going to bring race into it and we're going to tell the truth about it as well. And so with that, the truth that I gave to them was America was built on the lie that white skin is superior to black skin. And the systems of America was built off of that. And so that's how we got into the conversations of systematic racism. And so through these conversations, when we all have one-on-one conversations, we began to talk about systematic racism, how that's a lie. And I challenged them and I asked them and I gave them a call to action. And that call to action was to embrace the vision of Christ. And the vision of Christ is, he only gave us one command, to love the Lord God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And the second is like that unto that, to love your neighbor as yourself. So I said, embrace that vision and love your neighbor of color as yourself. And if you're going to do that, the way you do that is to become vulnerable. And I asked them to put themselves in people of color shoes and ask hard questions and become curious and start to look back at really the plight of African Americans and other people of color from the beginning of the founding of this country all the way to the present, and look at the systems that was built and the context of when our judicial system was built, our political system was built, our financial system was built. Look at the context of when it was built, in the plight of blacks when it was built. And then last is to use their voice to challenge that subconscious thought that white is superior to black that's been programmed into all of us, black and white. We've all been told this lie. To challenge that and then use your voice and to challenge people within your area of influence. So we started these conversations, and I mentioned Jason Devine, he's on the line now, but I poured out my heart, and when I said fight for love, I wanted to fight to get back engaged and not give up on something that meant so much to me. And I'm the better for it. In me and Jason's conversation, we talked a little bit about all of that other stuff, but at the end of the day, we ended up talking about his family, my family, what he was going through, his career. And that's what was so rewarding, man. That's what I was giving up on, all those deep, great conversations of support of men trying to get better. I was willing to give up because I was offended. But I'm thankful that I didn't, and I'm thankful that I re-engaged, and now I'm back on this path with my brothers, trying to support each other to get better. And part of getting better is talking about this race thing. So.
Thank you so much, Carlo. I love that. I think that's super cool. And, you know, one of the things that I've said often on these calls is not everyone is going to get into the fight the same way. You know, you have some that are protesting, you have some that are thinking about all of those who are in their immediate circle and they're maybe mentoring or trying to support colleagues by putting their names in the consideration set for high visible projects or promotions. So there's multiple ways for us to try to help fight this systemic racism. And I think that the example that you just shared, it amplifies, we don't have to necessarily have this big, massive goal. Each of us, we can just start immediately in the circles that we have those relationships with and impact those individuals. And that's kind of the approach that you took with it. And it wasn't just Jason Devine. You actually had written letters to several of your white male friends that you had lost some type of contact with because of, you know, you admitted it's how you were feeling about what was going on. So Jason has been kind to join this conversation. I want to give Jason a chance just to kind of come on and unmute yourself and greet the audience. And we would love to hear, first and foremost, your transparent reaction to when you first got the letter, and then when you both sat down and had that conversation. So Jason?
First, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, so as Carlo mentioned briefly when he was saying initially, he and I met in service in 2002 while we served at Al Jaber Air Force Base. And we had an immediate connection, and we both committed to each other at the end of that time frame that we weren't going to let that relationship just die out, and we were going to be intentional and deliberate and try and maintain that relationship. And since that time, we have been meeting periodically, as Carlo has said, and sharing our life stories with each other and supporting each other and encouraging each other and loving each other. And I have had for decades now the utmost respect, admiration, and love for Carlo. So about 2 months ago, I get an email from him, as he mentioned just a moment ago, basically apologizing, and I was moved by it. I was touched by it, and quite honestly, I didn't know how to respond to it immediately. In fact, I told him, I said, I'm not going to respond immediately. I want to think on this and then respond. And I did. And in that response, I said I would be more than happy. He had also requested that we, at our next meeting, spend some time talking about those issues. And I said I would be happy to do so. As the meeting grew closer to us actually occurring, quite honestly, I became a little apprehensive and nervous and even a little bit anxious, because as Carlos said even earlier in this Zoom call, you tend to talk about those types of things with your immediate family and very close friends or such. Even though Carlo is an incredibly close friend of mine, he and I had never discussed race per se. And I remember driving down to Greenville as we were meeting for breakfast, and I was praying, God, just give me an open mind and open heart. And I'm not the best communicator in the world, and I don't want to misspeak and say anything that comes across as offensively, but I do want to be receptive and open to this conversation. And we spent a couple hours, and we really got to the heart of the matter, and it stretched me. I was very appreciative that Carlo reached out and was intentional and deliberate and instigated that conversation. And it was, I don't think to say that it was life-changing is an overstatement. It's since that time, my eyes have been open to some things, and I've tried to ask myself as I hear news, as I talk to other people that are in my life, and I try to approach things from a different perspective. And I'm very thankful that Carlo reached out to me and instigated that meeting. It was life-changing.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. And again, so glad that you're here, and really appreciate your generosity of transparency and sharing the apprehension that perhaps you had going into that conversation. The one thing that I think that we all can agree upon is that these are complex times, and it calls for a little bit of discomfort, actually a lot of discomfort across all of us as we try to engage in these conversations. There's not going to be really a perfect time to make the conversations easier. So I think that right now is the best time just to go ahead and broach them. And was there a moment that maybe you thought, do I really want to have this conversation, or do I want to just continue maybe pretending that we don't have to have the race conversation?
No, it's a fair question. And even though I was a little bit nervous and apprehensive, I recognized that it was an important conversation to be had. Without going into too much background about me, I'm a peacemaker by nature. So conversations like that tend to challenge me to begin with. But I also recognize that having true, intimate, and honest communication and conversations is how we grow and how we develop. Not just on the micro level between Carlo and I, but on a macro level and how we just process things differently in the world. So I was nervous and apprehensive. I didn't want to offend him, didn't want to I was nervous and apprehensive, but having said that, I recognized it was important and it was needed. So, it was a very fruitful conversation. Thank you, Carlo, for sending the letter, and most importantly for having the conversation. Love you, buddy.
Love you, brother.
That is so awesome. So I want to now take a moment to open up the line for others to contribute to the conversation. Maybe there's some questions you have for Hannah, Carlo, or even Jason, if you're willing. I think that you may have a hard break and you're going to have to jump off soon, Jason, but we're glad to have you for as long as we can. But I want to just give people an opportunity just to express their thoughts and their sentiments about what you've heard so far as we continue this dialogue. So feel free to unmute yourself. I can't see the chat because of my technical difficulties, so I'm going to rely on you, Anna, if there's some questions there that we may want to address. But otherwise, this is an opportunity for you to unmute yourself and share with this audience and this community.
Dad, did you feel nervous sending the letter? Because I remember, I totally forgot, but a part of the 2020 revision movement, Student Government has a podcast and I hosted 1801 Live, but I was challenged to bring all 4 of the Greek councils together at USC, which, if you know, represents diverse demographics all over. So IFC, CPA, NPHC, and MGC, and it was a conversation to talk about race. And so typically with the podcast, we just do a Zoom, it's recorded, but I wanted it to be vulnerable and honest so that we wanted, like, there's no room to edit or anything. So we actually live streamed it to YouTube so that others can see. And although, and of course, like, I knew they were nervous too, but I was nervous to do it. And at first I thought it was fine, but the day before and the day of, I got multiple emails and calls from administrators like, okay, you know what you're doing, right? Like, you need to make sure if it goes left, what happens, or like, what is gonna happen? And so that made me even more scared, like, what's going on? Like, I was fine. And then others made me feel like, uh-oh, did I like shake something up or what happened? But ended up going great. But I just wanted to know, like, were you kind of nervous to send the email, or did you have any feelings when sending out the email?
I can relate to what you're saying, but actually in this particular instance for me, no. And the reason why is because I had went through these range of emotion. It was rage that ended up being a controlled fight for love. And I was more like, I have to do this for these men and for our relationships that I have been willing to give up on, that I'm no longer willing to give up on. I'm gonna fight for it. So it was kind of more of a no. Man, I was typing, now you've been typing it, well, this is the way Nika type. I was typing, if y'all heard any of that, I was typing and you could just hear the typing on me just saying, no, I got to let these brothers know that this is the truth, and we can talk about the truth and then move on with our relationship. So for me, I wasn't nervous. I can understand why you were. 2, these are men that I had built deep relations with, and I knew they wasn't racist. I knew they wasn't racist. I knew they had all types of different views. I knew one in particular, I knew not only did he support the movement, I was saying that, guys, we got to really look at this movement and see what about this racial spin do we need to disagree with, even if I knew he was a stark supporter, but I knew he wasn't a racist. Hence our relationship. This brother would have done anything for me. And so I was like, no, I got to go and challenge and do this for us. And I knew they would receive it. I knew, because we had invested in each other. And that's the one thing, everybody have platforms. I admire your public platform. I admire Nika's public platform, but I'm an introvert to my bones. I mean, I'm an introvert's introvert. And I don't have a public platform. So what I needed to do was leverage the value I had been adding in individual lives. And thank God that I had been adding value into different people's lives, and people been adding value in my lives. And I leveraged that to say, let's talk. And wasn't nervous at all about that talk that had to happen, or else I was going to lose something that's been so valuable to me up to that point.
And Carlo, it was multiple individuals that you actually reached out to, I recall. And so I would imagine that the reaction maybe varied across the board. Can you just talk openly about maybe some of the disappointments, if there were any, to some of the responses?
You know what? To this point, I hadn't been disappointed with any response. Every response has been, Carlo, didn't know all that was going on in your head, but definitely want to talk about it. So that's all I could ask is let's talk. There's some stuff going on in my head, and one of the things I wanted them to see, Nika, is the same way, because we all been programmed the same way that at times they are challenged to see people of color in a positive light based upon social programming. Do I sometimes struggle to see white people in a non-racist light because of social programming? And we both are challenged, but it's one that we gotta fight. I gotta fight to see you as whatever your name is, and let's see where this go versus this is a white person. This is a Trump supporter. I don't want nothing to do with them. I gotta fight to get past that to really get to and learn people and get to know people, and they have to do the same. And so I've been really encouraged. Now they have ran with it at different levels. Jason keeps sending me content on like different things he's seeing on the internet about, you know. And I'm like, Jason, you might need to lead a rally or something, man. I mean, he has really engaged. The whole challenge was become curious, make yourself vulnerable and become curious about our plight. He's now studying and looking at this thing like, oh man, he sent me this powerful video of this preacher preaching on why it's important to say Black Lives Matter versus all lives matter. And Jason, in his vulnerability, said, Carlo, I've been saying all lives matter, but I'll never say it again because I now understand it. Wow. Wow. And so yeah, Jason's probably gonna lead our next march. But outside of that, there's been some other brothers that, while they heard me out and we still engaged, I don't know that they're going to the level of doing that type research. But the longer we stay together, if we don't give up on each other, they too will see it in a whole different light, and they will respond to it in a different way, which is fine. We're going to respond to it differently, but we just got to have a conversation.
That is great. Jason, I'm not sure if you're still on to hear this, but you're getting lots of love in the chat room. People are like, go Jason. Yes, that's awesome. So.
Well, I appreciate it. It's I can't actually remember the name of the pastor that of the video that I saw. And as I mentioned to Carlo, I was one of the many things that I truly love and cherish about our relationship is our truthfulness and our transparency and our vulnerability with each other. And I had told him when I sent the video, I said, prior to watching this video, there was an element of me when I would just be candid, when I would hear some people say Black Lives Matter, my initial gut response was, yes, but all lives matter. We all are worthy people. And then I doing some research, as I was telling Carlo, and I came across this pastor online, and his response was, that would be something synonymous to when Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount and say, blessed are the poor. And then someone saying, no, Jesus, blessed is everyone. And Jesus wasn't trying to negate the value of all people, but he was trying to identify that there is a certain individual group right now that is undergoing and experiencing a significant plight that the rest of the population wasn't. And it was out of love and it was out of concern that he was saying that. And I felt incredibly convicted when I saw the video of the pastor. And I did. I forwarded it to Carlo and I said, never again will I say, but all lives matter. There's nothing wrong with identifying a specific group and saying, right now, we're going to focus on this particular group. We're not negating the value of others, but there's nothing wrong with highlighting the plight of a specific group right now and saying, you know what, we're going to acknowledge that it's been tough. We're going to acknowledge that there has been injustice, that there has been unfairness and atrocities that have happened to this particular group. And we're going to recognize that. And that's what I sent back to Carlo. And again, I genuinely feel like a lot of that was instigated by Carlo's willingness to be vulnerable and send the email out in the first place. So again, very thankful that you took the initiative, Carlo, and continuing just to try to educate myself and put myself in other people's shoes.
That is so great. That is awesome. Okay, so Anna, do we have any questions in the chat room right now?
We actually have a really good one. The question was, Carlo, we want to know what was in that letter, because people want to know how to talk to their white friends or their friends who aren't woke yet, and we want a little bit of insight and a little bit of a few tips.
What was in that letter is, as I said, these are not just white people I ran into on the road and started lecturing them or started saying, hey,
But
we valued each other.
Sorry, Carlo. I think also there's a sentiment that it's harder actually to talk to people you're close to rather than strangers. It's easier to preach to strangers, but it's harder to talk to friends and family that you're scared you'd offend. So.
And so, yeah, I agree. But here's the thing about leadership. Leadership is the art of adding, the art of influencing people. And the way you influence people is you add value. When you know that you've been adding value to someone, I know that I can leverage that value that I've been adding. And so my confidence in approaching it, I know I've added value. And you have added value to me. I'm gonna leverage it. And that's why in that I said, look, if I've added any value to your life, if I've deposited any value in your life, if you disagree with what I'm saying, count it as a withdrawal of the value I've added. Don't shut me down. I'm making a withdrawal because I've made some deposits. I'm just making a withdrawal. Let's have this conversation. And so based off of that, I use what our relationship was built off of. Our relationship with all of these men was built off of our Christian belief in pushing each other to be better men of God, to our families, our business, our communities. And so with that, here is the vision of the person that we say we follow. He really said, treat each other as neighbors and put each other in each other's shoes. Be vulnerable and use your voice. And so I gave him a call to action. And those are my tips. But really laying my heart out, I was laying my heart out to some people who I knew wouldn't want me to feel the way I was feeling. I told them that I cried like George Floyd was my very son, brother, or dad. I mean, I literally wept over that. And I shared that with them. Guys, to see this and to see the system struggle with this, it broke me down. And I knew they wouldn't want to hear that I was broken like that without saying, what can I do? That's just leveraging value. So in all of our relationships, I don't think we just go and just choose our coworker and say, let's have this deep conversation with, or there may be a time when you do. But if you're asking me how I did it, I looked for where I was adding value and I leveraged that to say, let's have this tough conversation. And I know we can't throw each other away. We mean too much to each other to throw each other away if we disagree.
Awesome. There's some great questions in the chat. Would anyone like to unmute yourself and ask your question directly?
I will. This is Eric Graben at the White Law Firm. I wanted to ask Carlo, have any of your white friends reached out to you and asked you first about your experiences either with the police or at work? And do you like it when white people ask without you first raising the issue?
I've had one, and actually me and this guy met in the military as well, down in Warner Robins, Georgia, and we haven't talked in probably 15 to 16 years. But I'm a relator. Jason said he's a peacemaker. Part of my personality, I'm a relator. So I don't like dealing with a bunch of people, but the 1, 2, 3 that I deal with, I go deep. And so back in 15 years ago, we had a deep relationship. We just lost contact. He reached out to me and he said, look, just want to talk to you. We respected each other so much, want to talk to you. And yes, I appreciated that. I appreciated him reaching out, just saying, man, I don't know. I don't know. I just know something's going on that I don't like in our country. And that's basically the way he approached it. Something's happening in our country and I've been awakened to something that I don't like, but I want to talk about it. I appreciate it. Matter of fact, he's coming up next week from Georgia. He's coming up next week for us to have lunch together. And so we're going to further the conversation. So absolutely. It just shows that you care. And it's also okay not to know, but just be curious. Not to know. You don't know what you don't know, but I am curious about your plight. I am curious about what I don't know.
Eric,
Thanks.
that is such a great question. And the one thing that I will add to it is, each person is different. I think that we can't deny people of our, their individuality. And the truth is that people are processing the events of what's very up front and center in different ways. And so there are a number of people from the Black community who don't quite honestly have the emotional capital to even engage. And so I would just say that if you were to approach someone to have a conversation, just, be patient and allow them the time to, when they feel like they're ready to engage, to do so. Otherwise, it's going to continue just to exasperate the burden that they're carrying right now.
Hi, Nika. This is Nika Mussolini, and I want to piggyback off of something that Carlo said and that you just said as well, in response to Eric. When this all started happening, I started getting inboxes, text messages, phone calls of my white friends wanting to have a conversation, asking me what can they do to help the situation, and at the time I was spent. I had nothing to give them, but I've been working on healing over these last couple of weeks, and now I'm ready to have the conversation. So thank you, Nika, for all that you post and for these intentional conversations, because whether you know it or not, you're making a difference. You have actually deposited into me when I thought that I had nothing else to give. So thank you. But my question is for Jason. Jason, do you extend the conversation and content to non-people of color?
I actually have. It's actually motivated me to have some deeper conversations with family members along the same lines, and trying to open their eyes as my eyes have been opened. So in short, yes.
Right. I think that is very, very important. So I know as a college student, social media is everything. So Black Lives Matter movement, it's a trend right now. If you're not posting about the social injustices, the racial injustices, you're not cool right now. It's a cool thing to do. Like, it's a trend. And so although the resources that are available, the posts that are being posted, they're great. It's right. If not matched with action, I feel like it's considered performative allyship and performative social advocacy. And so I've been challenging my friends, and even in the conversation I had with other student leaders of other Greek organizations, they were like, yes, I understand this is wrong. I posted something yesterday about it, and I was like, it's kind of the same way as if you don't match it with action, you promoting an event, you creating an event and promoting an event, but never actually do the event. The event doesn't happen. And so to that point, it's like, that's great that you're advocating in ways of social media posting, but also I feel like the deep root of actually advocating and making change is having those tough conversations. Specifically, when I talk to my white friends, having those conversations within their groups of people that look like them and her or him and their white friends, rather than, I know it's probably once we have the first initial conversation, me and you talking about race, it was nervous at first, but now you feel comfortable coming to me about these things because you know where I stand. So when you see something, I agree, let's talk about it, but also, are you sending these to your friends that do not look like me, that might be opposing to what you're sending, if that makes sense?
No, Hannah, that's really solid insight. No, really, you make me really proud as I listen to you, because I'm like, wow, she went to performative allyship. Yes, yeah. But yes, you're still right. And people they're watching. They are, watching with an investigative eye, because they want to know the words that you're speaking and that you're posting. Is there action behind that, or is it just ringing hollow? And so I do think that your point of amplifying the need to make sure that we are not just exercising certain actions so that we can be perceived as being on the right side, but that we really are doing the hard work is important. And quite honestly, even when you think about the Black Lives Matter murals that are going up in so many cities, and the NFL playing the Black anthem, I mean, there's so many things that I think in gesture may have come from a good place, but the reality is that we need to stop avoiding doing the hard work and just start doing the hard work. And I get it, it's complex. It's not as though there's this simple blueprint to help undo 400 plus years of systemic racism. But I also think that it serves as a reminder that we can't just solve this with, taking down statues or, putting up a mural. but we need to really go deep and look at systems, policies, procedures, and let us emerge stronger from that.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Diana Lee, and I'm now speaking on behalf of immigrants. There's a lot of us that are from other countries. Now, in my case, I was born and raised in Mexico, so I was part of the majority of the population. So it is very different, as I learned living in the United States. I'm married an American. So the difference with me is that because I was raised as a majority, my perception, my responses are different than what you would think coming from a minority person. And I worked for an HBCU for many years, and I learned so much in there. I learned the value of HBCUs for sure, but much more than that. And I feel that also immigrants have a lot of lack of the knowledge of what really means to be a Black person in America, because coming from immigrants that I have met, they perceive Blacks as this, spoiled children, they have so much, but no, you know what I'm saying? It's because they're coming from a background of maybe being poor or not having resources. So it's also a lot of the education with immigrants, because it's a whole different perception.
Great point, Diana. And I completely agree. In fact, my firm has a number of clients, and many of them are global. And so oftentimes as we're working through some of the strategies, we have to be very thoughtful about, is this going to resonate as well in some of those other international markets? And so you're so right. I appreciate you bringing that to the conversation. We have a few more minutes left. Would anyone else like to contribute to the conversation or ask questions of any of our guests?
Hi, Nika. This is Ann White.
Hi, Ann.
Hi. First of all, thank you to everyone who has joined the call and shared your stories and the work that you're doing. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to touch on, Nika, what you were talking about, and you too, Hannah, about sort of the symbols, the murals and the anthem and all of those things. And I agree with you that can be very performative, but I also think that the reactions to those symbols really bring to light all of the hard work that has to be done, all of the resistance to those symbols, people trying to paint over the Black Lives Matters murals, or people arguing about whether the anthem should be brought. It just brings to bear, highlights that those attitudes are still so strong, and the work that we have to do is so hard, and we need to continue doing it. And I don't know if it would be continuing to be out there and be so visible if those symbols weren't out there.
That's true. That's true. I appreciate that, Ann. And they definitely serve a purpose. So don't get me wrong at all. I think that there is certainly a lot of hope that has been instilled by people being able to walk and see a Black Lives Matter mural, or, to see others giving some level of reverence to the Black community, and helping them to feel a sense of humanity, and that's so important. But I also think that we have to just make sure that we continue to hold those organizations accountable to the hard work as well. I see it as a stepping stone, and again, I don't want to discourage those efforts, but I don't want people to now feel as though that exercising or practicing that type of performative actions, that's where it stops. That's really just where it begins.
Absolutely.
I see it as more complementing the real work. In order for the real work to get done, of course, it needs to be attention around the topic. So things of that nature, or even smaller, us individually posting on social media, it all helps the overall goal. But going back to the trend, because we see this was trending before the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, in earlier years, right? But there's a trend, but then it stops. And so I just don't want it to get stagnant to where even after they paint that road over again, and it might not say Black Lives Matter, will you still internalize that and still continue to strive towards these changes even after this stops becoming a trend? Because there's going to be a day where social media is not flooded with resources, not flooded with Black Lives Matter, but will this still be a priority to everyone in order to make these systematic changes that have been going on for so long? But I definitely agree that it complements, it's necessary, but also the action part is also necessary, and it needs to happen even if Black Lives Matter is not on the road, if your social media is not flooded with Black squares. That makes sense.
No, that's great. This has been such rich conversation. I'm so grateful to you, Carlo and Hannah and Jason, and then every single one of you that have taken the time to join today. I appreciate you welcoming the idea of me inviting my daughter and my husband. I thought it was a little risky at first, but I also thought there's some substance behind all of their stories and their experiences, and I wanted you to have a glimpse of that. So here's how I want to end. There has been something trending on Facebook, actually social media in general, that I have found pretty profound. And so I want to read this to you, and that's how we're going to end today. So I will go ahead and say, before I read this final note, that we invite you back here next Friday, where we have Sharmise Mangle, and those registrations are already open. And after this afternoon, you will receive an email with the replay as well as some key takeaways from today's conversation. So here it is. And it didn't have a title, but I'm labeling this 400 years. 400 years ago, white people brought Black people over here and enslaved them and sold them and treated them as less than human. For 250 years, while white men formed the country and created its laws and its systems of government, while 10 to 15 generations of white families got to grow and flourish and make choices that could make their lives better. And then 150 years ago, white people freed Black people from slavery. But then angry white people created laws that made it impossible for them to vote or to own land or to have the same rights as white people, and even erected monuments glorifying people who actively had fought to keep them enslaved. All while another 5-10 generations of white families got to grow and accumulate wealth and gain land and get an education. And then 60 years ago, we made it legal for Black people to vote and to be free from discrimination. But angry white people still fought to keep schools segregated and closed off neighborhoods to white people only. And it made it harder for Black people to get bank loans or get quality education or healthcare or to marry a white person. All while another 2 to 3 generations of white families got to grow and pass their wealth down to their children and their children's children. And then we entered an age where we had the technology to make public the things that were already happening in private: the beatings, the stop and frisk laws, the unequal distribution of justice, the police brutality. And only now, after 400 plus years and 20 plus generations of a white head start, are we starting to truly have dialogue about what it means to be Black. Ponder on that this weekend. Thank you all so very much. Take care.